The galaxy had always believed that humanity was predictable. For nearly 300 years, humans had built their reputation on diplomacy, trade, and cooperation. While powerful empires fought endless wars over territory and resources, Earth invested in science, infrastructure, and exploration. Human cargo vessels traveled through thousands of systems. Human engineers helped rebuild worlds devastated by conflict. Human diplomats negotiated peace treaties that prevented entire sectors from collapsing into chaos. Most civilizations respected humanity. Others saw them as weak. And among those who underestimated humans, none were more arrogant than the Varesh Dominion. The Dominion controlled hundreds of star systems across the Outer Rim. Their fleets were enormous. Their armies were legendary. Entire civilizations had surrendered at the mere sight of their warships entering orbit. For decades, the Varesh leadership had expanded their borders through intimidation and conquest, and now they wanted more. At the edge of Dominion territory stood a small human installation known as Frontier Base Sigma-7. Located near an unstable region of space called the Black Rift, Sigma-7 wasn't important by military standards. It housed fewer than 300 personnel. Most of them were scientists, engineers, and communication specialists. Its defensive fleet consisted of only 4 patrol ships. To outsiders, the station looked insignificant, worthless, exactly the kind of target the Dominion preferred. Inside the towering halls of the Dominion capital world, Emperor Carrick studied a holographic projection of the Frontier Station. The image rotated slowly before him. One tiny station for small patrol vessels, no major fleet presence, no planetary defenses, no reinforcements nearby. The Emperor smiled. Humans claim this sector belongs to them. Several military commanders laughed. One admiral folded his arms. They are traitors, not warriors. Another nodded. If we seize the station, Earth will protest. Nothing more. The Emperor's smile widened. Then we will remind the galaxy who truly rules the Outer Rim. No one questioned the order. Within hours, a Dominion strike fleet entered hyperspace. 37 warships, thousands of soldiers, enough firepower to erase entire colonies. Meanwhile, across the Black Rift, life continued normally aboard Sigma-7. Commander Ethan Graves walked through the station's central corridor, reviewing maintenance reports. The station wasn't glamorous. Aging bulkheads lined the halls. The artificial gravity occasionally malfunctioned. The cafeteria served food that nobody enjoyed, but Sigma-7 was home. Many crew members had spent years there. Some had even brought families. To them, it was more than a military outpost. It was a community. Suddenly, alarms erupted across the station. Red warning lights flooded every corridor. The calm atmosphere vanished instantly. Crew members rushed toward command stations. Technicians sprinted through maintenance tunnels. Graves froze. His communicator crackled. "Commander, we've detected multiple hyperspace signatures." Graves immediately headed for the operations center. "What size?" The reply came with obvious concern. "Large." Moments later, he entered the command deck. The massive tactical display illuminated the room. Everyone fell silent. Dozens of red markers appeared across the screen. A cold feeling settled over the room. Graves stared at the display. 37 enemy warships. His executive officer whispered the words. Everyone was thinking. "That's a full invasion fleet." The Dominion vessels emerged from hyperspace like predators surrounding wounded prey. Gigantic battleships, heavy cruisers, assault carriers. The station's 4 patrol ships looked microscopic by comparison. An incoming transmission appeared. Graves accepted it. The face of a Varesh admiral materialized. His expression carried absolute confidence. "You occupy Dominion space." Graves remained calm. "This is recognized Terran territory." The admiral laughed. "Not anymore." The transmission ended. Outside, Dominion weapons began charging. Inside Sigma-7, every person understood the truth. There would be no victory, no heroic defense, no miracle reinforcements, only survival. Then the first enemy volley struck. The station shook violently. Explosions tore through outer sections. Emergency systems activated instantly. Screams echoed through damaged corridors. Fires erupted across multiple decks. The invasion had begun. And far away on Earth, a single encrypted emergency signal was already racing toward humanity's highest command. A signal carrying only 6 words. Frontier Base Sigma-7 under attack. The message would arrive in less than 2 minutes. And when it did, the galaxy would learn why attacking humanity was the greatest mistake any empire could make. The emergency signal crossed the stars faster than any conventional transmission. Encoded within layers of military-grade quantum encryption, it traveled through humanity's vast communication network, jumping from relay to relay until it reached its final destination, Earth. More specifically, the Terran Defense Command beneath the mountains of New Geneva. Inside the command center, hundreds of officers monitored shipping routes, exploration missions, and military patrols across known space. Most shifts were uneventful. This one was different. A sharp alert suddenly echoed throughout the operations floor. Several officers looked up simultaneously. A red notification appeared across the primary tactical display. Priority 1, emergency transmission. The room instantly fell silent. Duty Officer Marcus Hale opened the message. His face changed immediately. Get Fleet Command. Nearby personnel exchanged worried glances. Priority 1 alerts were rare. Extremely rare. Another officer approached. What happened? Hale looked at him. Sigma-7. The officer froze. What about it? Hale swallowed. It's under attack. Within seconds, the entire command structure of Earth was activated. Encrypted channels opened. Military leaders were awakened. Government officials were contacted. Strategic systems came online. And above all else, one protocol was initiated. Terran Response Directive 0. A protocol so secret that even many senior officers had never seen it activated. Meanwhile, nearly 30,000 light-years away, Frontier Base Sigma-7 continued to suffer under relentless bombardment. Explosions rocked the station every few seconds. Entire sections had already lost their atmosphere. Emergency bulkheads sealed damaged compartments. Medical teams struggled to keep up with casualties. Commander Ethan Graves moved through the chaos with determination. Report. His executive officer checked the tactical display. Outer defense grid destroyed. Another impact shook the room. Sparks exploded from nearby consoles. A technician shouted, "We've lost patrol ship Atlas." The screen displayed the vessel breaking apart under concentrated enemy fire. Several crew members looked away. They personally knew people aboard that ship. Friends, family, are now gone. Outside the station, the Dominion fleet tightened its encirclement. The invasion was progressing exactly as planned. Inside the flagship Ironclaw, Admiral Vorik watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. A subordinate approached. Human resistance is collapsing. Vorik nodded. As expected, the officer hesitated. There is one concern. The Admiral raised an eyebrow. Explain. We intercepted a transmission leaving the station before our jamming field fully activated. Vorik laughed, so the signal likely reached Earth. The bridge grew quiet, but Vorik remained unconcerned. Good. The officer blinked. Good. Vorik smiled. Let them hear about it. The Admiral turned toward the tactical display. I want humanity to understand exactly what happens when they challenge the Dominion. Several officers nodded confidently. After all, the Dominion had defeated dozens of civilizations. Humanity would be no different, or so they believed. Back on Earth, the atmosphere inside Terran Defense Command had become tense. Massive holographic maps displayed military assets throughout known space. Fleet commanders appeared through secure communications links. The highest-ranking military officer in humanity, Fleet Marshal Jonathan Caney, entered the operations center. Everyone stood immediately. Kane walked directly to the central display. Situation. An intelligence officer responded. Sigma-7 is under attack by a Varesh Dominion strike fleet. Fleet size 37 confirmed warships. The room grew quiet. Another officer added, "Station defenses are insufficient. Survival probability is below 6%. Kane stared at the tactical display. His expression remained unreadable. How long until the station falls? Less than 3 hours. A heavy silence settled across the room. Then Kane asked a question that surprised everyone. "Have they confirmed Dominion authorization?" The intelligence officer nodded. "Yes, sir. We intercepted direct command codes from the Dominion High Council." Kane slowly folded his arms. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked toward the operations staff. "Activate Directive 0. The room became absolutely silent. One officer visibly palled. "Sir," Kane interrupted. Now, no one argued. Across Earth, hidden military installations suddenly awakened. Encrypted networks came alive. Ancient defense systems that had remained dormant for decades began receiving authorization codes. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, enormous facilities powered up. In the asteroid belts beyond Jupiter, classified shipyards activated production lines. And somewhere far beyond explored space, something enormous received a transmission. A transmission containing only a single command. Authorization confirmed. Protocol Nemesis activated. Back at Sigma 7, Commander Graves watched another section of the station disappear in a fireball. The battle was almost over. The station was dying. His people were dying. Yet strangely, he found himself smiling. One of his officers noticed. "Sir." Graves looked at the tactical display, then toward the stars beyond the viewport. "They made a mistake." The officer frowned. "What a mistake?" Graves's smile widened slightly. "They think they attacked a frontier base. Another explosion rocked the station, but they actually attacked humanity. And in the depths of space, unseen by both sides, something began moving. Something the galaxy had forgotten existed. Something the Dominion had never even heard about. A weapon created for a war so terrible that humanity had sworn never to use it again. Until now, for nearly 3 centuries, the galaxy believed it understood humanity. They saw Earth's merchant fleets crossing the stars. They saw human diplomats settling disputes between rival empires. They saw humanitarian ships delivering aid to worlds devastated by war. What they never saw were the secrets hidden behind humanity's peaceful image. Those secrets existed for one reason. Because humans remembered history long before humanity reached the stars. Earth had endured thousands of years of conflict. Nations had risen and fallen. Empires had burned. Entire civilizations had nearly destroyed themselves through arrogance and war. Humanity had learned a lesson that many alien races never did. Peace only survives when backed by strength. And deep beneath that peace rested Protocol Nemesis, a contingency so extreme that most governments believed it would never be activated. Until now, thousands of light years from Earth inside a classified installation buried beneath the surface of Mars. Warning lights illuminated enormous underground chambers. Automated systems came online. Massive blast doors began opening. Ancient machinery awakened after decades of silence. Military personnel watched from observation platforms as colossal structures slowly emerged from hidden launch bays. Many of them had trained their entire careers for this moment. None expected to actually witness it. One young officer stared in disbelief. "Those are real." The facility commander nodded. "Very real." The officer swallowed hard. Before him stood vessels unlike anything used by the modern Terran Navy. These weren't cruisers. They weren't battleships. They weren't carriers. They belonged to an entirely different category. A category that officially didn't exist. The designation displayed across the command screens was simple. Nemesis-class strategic vessels. Weapons built for the absolute worst-case scenario. Weapons designed not to win wars. Weapons designed to end them. Meanwhile, the battle at Sigma 7 grew worse. The station had lost nearly 40% of its structure. Entire decks were gone. Life support systems were failing. The surviving patrol ships fought desperately against impossible odds. One after another, they fell. Commander Ethan Graves remained on the command deck. His uniform was stained with smoke and blood. Most of the bridge crew looked exhausted, yet nobody surrendered. Nobody even suggested it. A communications officer suddenly turned toward Graves. "Sir, what is it?" The officer looked confused. "We just received a priority transmission." Graves frowned. "From who?" The answer surprised everyone. "Earth." The bridge fell silent. "Put it through." The message appeared instantly. Only one sentence. "Hold for 1 hour." Nothing else. No explanation. No promises. Just 4 words. Several officers exchanged uncertain looks. One technician laughed nervously. 1 hour against this. Graves studied the message. Then he smiled. A genuine smile, because he understood something the others didn't. Earth never made promises it couldn't keep. Aboard the Dominion flagship Ironclaw, Admiral Vorik reviewed the latest battle reports. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Sigma-7's defenses were collapsing. Human casualties continued to rise. Victory was inevitable. An intelligence officer approached. "Admiral, we've detected unusual activity." Vorik barely looked up. "What kind?" "Multiple long-range energy signatures." The Admiral sighed. "Human reinforcements?" "We're not sure." Vorik finally turned. "How many ships?" The officer hesitated. "Unknown." The bridge grew quiet. Unknown wasn't an answer Dominion commanders liked hearing. "Clarify." The officer adjusted the display. "We can detect the energy output." A map appeared. Several commanders leaned forward. Then confusion spread across the room. The readings made no sense. The power signatures were enormous, far larger than conventional warships. One officer frowned. "Could the sensors be malfunctioning?" Another shook his head. "They've been verified 3 times. Vorik stared at the readings. A strange feeling settled in his stomach. For the first time since the invasion began, uncertainty entered his thoughts. Far beyond Dominion space, hidden within a region officially marked as uncharted, darkness covered an immense structure drifting between the stars. At first glance, it resembled a moon. Then the engines activated. The stars around it seemed to bend as colossal power systems awakened. Layer after layer of armor illuminated. Weapons arrays larger than entire cities emerged from protected sections of the hull. Thousands of dormant systems came online simultaneously. The vessel's artificial intelligence processed the activation codes. Identity confirmed. Authorization accepted. Protocol Nemesis active. Mission parameters received. Target assigned. A synthetic voice echoed through corridors that had remained silent for decades. Strategic vessel Nemesis Prime online. Around it. More signals appeared. 1, then 3, then 7, then 12. A forgotten fleet was awakening. The ships began accelerating. Reality itself seemed to distort around them. Moments later, the entire armada vanished into hyperspace. Their destination was not Sigma-7. Their destination was far more terrifying. The heart of the Varesh Dominion itself, their capital world. And no one in the Dominion had any idea that humanity's response was already on its way. 1 hour. That was all Earth had asked of Sigma-7. 1 impossible hour. Inside the battered frontier station, Commander Ethan Graves watched the countdown timer on the tactical display. 53 minutes remained around him. The station was dying. Smoke filled the corridors. Emergency lights flickered constantly. Medical bays overflowed with wounded personnel. Entire sections of the station had already been abandoned. Yet somehow, Sigma-7 still stood. Outside, the Dominion fleet continued its relentless assault. Wave after wave of energy blasts hammered the station's weakened shields. Each impact sent tremors through the structure. Every officer on the command deck knew the truth. The station could not survive forever. The only question was whether they could survive long enough. Graves looked toward the stars beyond the damaged viewport. "Come on," he whispered. "Whatever Earth is sending, get here fast." Thousands of light years away, the Varesh capital world of Draura remained completely unaware of the danger approaching. Draura was the jewel of the Dominion, a planet covered by vast cities stretching from horizon to horizon. Towering spires pierced the clouds. Massive orbital shipyards surrounded the planet. Defense platforms formed multiple rings around the system. No enemy fleet had ever reached Drora. For centuries, it had been considered untouchable. Inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Carrick celebrated the latest reports from Sigma-7. The invasion was proceeding exactly as planned. Ministers and military leaders gathered around enormous holographic displays showing the battle. The Emperor raised a glass. To another Dominion victory, the room erupted with applause. One admiral smiled. By tomorrow, the entire sector will belong to us. Another nodded. The humans will learn their place. Laughter filled the chamber. No one noticed the young communications officer entering quietly. No one noticed the concern on his face. And no one paid attention when he requested an immediate audience with the Emperor. Not until he spoke. Your Majesty. The room fell silent. Carrick turned. What is it? The officer swallowed. We've detected unidentified hyperspace disturbances. Several commanders exchanged amused looks. Where? The officer activated a display. The smile vanished from every face in the room. The disturbances were approaching Drora. Fast, very fast, and there were dozens of them, aboard the Dominion flagship Ironclaw. Admiral Vorik received the same report. At first he dismissed it. Then additional sensor data arrived and everything changed. The readings were impossible. The approaching vessels possessed energy outputs unlike anything recorded in Dominion databases. Each signal rivaled an entire battle fleet. One officer stared at the screen. Admiral Vorik's expression darkened. How many? The officer hesitated. 12 confirmed contacts. The bridge became silent. 12. Only 12 ships, yet their combined power exceeded hundreds of conventional warships. Another officer spoke softly. We've never seen anything like this. Neither had Vorik, and he didn't like it. Not one bit. Across the stars, the Nemesis fleet advanced. Space warped around the enormous vessels. Their engines generated gravitational distortions, visible across entire sectors. Every civilization that detected them immediately began investigating. Confusion spread through neighboring empires. Emergency meetings were called. Military analysts scrambled to identify the mysterious armada. Nobody could because humanity had spent centuries hiding it. The fleet had been created after Earth's first interstellar war. A war so devastating that humanity vowed never to be caught unprepared again. The result had been Project Nemesis, a secret program hidden from the galaxy. A fleet built not for conquest, not for deterrence, but for retaliation. Over 200 years of technological advancement had been poured into 12 ships, 12 monsters, 12 nightmares, 12 weapons designed to make any enemy regret starting a war. And now, they were awake. Back at Sigma-7, the situation grew desperate. 40 minutes remained. A direct hit destroyed another section of the station. The command deck shook violently. Several crew members were thrown from there. Stations. Alarms screamed continuously. The shields finally collapsed. The room became silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Without shields, the station's destruction was only a matter of time. Graves slowly stood. Prepare evacuation procedures. His executive officer looked shocked. Sir, we hold until the last possible moment. The commander glanced around the bridge. No fear, no panic, only determination. If this station falls, it falls fighting. The crew nodded. Not a single person argued. At that exact moment, deep within the DRR system, warning alarms suddenly activated. Every sensor platform, every defense station, every military installation, the same alert, the same impossible message. Unknown fleet arriving. Distance 1 light minute. Imperial commanders stared in disbelief. That was impossible. No fleet could move that fast. No fleet could cross such distances undetected. Yet the readings were real, and they were getting closer. Then space itself cracked open across the darkness beyond Drora. 12 gigantic tiers appeared in reality. The stars vanished behind them. The void seemed to split apart. One by one, colossal silhouettes emerged. The first Nemesis vessel entered normal space, then the second, then the third. Soon all 12 stood visible. The largest ship measured nearly 30 kilometers long. The shadow alone eclipsed entire cities. The capital world had never seen anything so enormous, so terrifying, or so powerful. Across every military command center in the Dominion, silence fell. The impossible had arrived, and for the first time in centuries, the Varash Dominion was afraid. The arrival of the Nemesis fleet changed everything. Across the DRA system, millions of citizens looked toward the heavens as emergency broadcasts interrupted every network. The giant vessels hung motionless in space, silent, unmoving, watching, even from orbit. Their immense size was impossible to comprehend. Entire cities could fit inside some sections of their hulls. Defense analysts struggled to process the sensor readings. The numbers made no sense. Every scan returned the same conclusion. The fleet possessed enough firepower to devastate the entire system, and it had appeared without warning. Inside the Imperial Palace, panic began spreading among the Dominion leadership. Emperor Carrick stood before the central holographic display, staring at the 12 gigantic ships. For the first time in decades, he looked uncertain. A senior admiral broke the silence. "Your Majesty, our fleet around DRA numbers over 400 warships." Another commander nodded. "The capital defenses are fully operational." Yet nobody sounded confident because the sensor reports kept arriving, and every report painted the same terrifying picture. The unknown vessels weren't merely powerful. They were beyond anything the Dominion had ever imagined. One officer finally asked the question everyone feared. Who built them? No one had an answer. Then the communications console activated. A signal was incoming. Origin, unknown human vessel. The room fell silent. Carrick slowly turned, put it through. The transmission connected immediately. A human figure appeared on the display, an older man wearing a dark Terran fleet uniform. His expression was calm, completely calm, as if he wasn't standing at the center of the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy. "Identify yourself!" The Emperor's voice carried authority. The human officer nodded slightly. "I am Fleet Marshal Jonathan Kane of the Terran Defense Command." Several Dominion officials exchanged nervous glances. The same Kane who commanded humanity's military. The same Kane who almost never appeared in public. If he was personally present, this was serious, very serious. Kane spoke again. 3 hours ago, your forces attacked Frontier Base Sigma-7. No one interrupted. You violated Terran territory. A holographic image appeared beside him. The damaged station, burning, broken, under attack. Then another image appeared. Destroyed human patrol ships, dead crew members, wounded civilians. The room grew uncomfortable. Kane's voice remained calm, which somehow made it more frightening. "You fired first." Silence. "You initiated hostilities." Silence. "You chose war." The Emperor finally responded. The station occupied Dominion space. Kane didn't even blink. No. One word. Simple. Absolute. Then he continued. "You had a choice." Another image appeared. Records of diplomatic warnings, border agreements, peace treaties. Every document the Dominion had ignored. Carrick's expression hardened. "What do you want?" The room became silent. Kane looked directly at him. Immediate withdrawal from Sigma-7. Nobody moved. Return of all occupied territories. Still silence. Full reparations. Several Dominion officers reacted angrily. One slammed a fist against a console. Another muttered curses. But Kane wasn't finished. And a formal public apology. The Emperor laughed. A cold laugh. "You threatened the Dominion." Kane's eyes never left him. "No. Pause. I'm informing you." The atmosphere inside the palace instantly changed because everyone understood exactly what he meant. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't diplomacy. This was an ultimatum. Meanwhile, at Sigma-7, the countdown continued. 23 minutes remained. The station was barely holding together. Commander Graves stood beside a damaged tactical console. Reports grew worse every minute. Power failures, structural collapses, rising casualties. Then suddenly, every sensor operator turned toward their screens. One technician blinked. "Sir." Another looked stunned. "We're detecting a transmission." Graves frowned. "From Earth," the officer nodded. "System-wide." The message spread instantly across every military frequency in the sector, across every Dominion vessel, across every neutral monitoring station, across every listening post. One simple announcement broadcast by humanity to the entire galaxy. The Varash Dominion has initiated hostilities against the Terran Union. Humanity recognizes a state of war. Retaliatory operations are now active. The transmission ended. The silence afterward felt heavier than the message itself, because every civilization understood what had just happened. Humanity had officially gone to war, and nobody knew what came next. Back in the drawer system, Emperor Carrick rose from his throne. His pride wouldn't allow retreat. His ego wouldn't allow surrender. His empire had conquered hundreds of worlds. He would not bow before humanity. Not now, not ever. He pointed toward the display. "Deploy the defense fleets." Several officers hesitated. Carrick's voice thundered through the chamber. Now the orders were transmitted immediately across the capital system. Hundreds of Dominion warships began mobilizing. Defense stations powered weapons. Planetary shields activated. Fighter squadrons launched. The entire military machine prepared for battle. Fleet Marshal Kane watched it happen. Then he sighed quietly, almost sadly, as though he had hoped for a different outcome. A final transmission left the flagship. One sentence directed to every Nemesis vessel. Authorization granted. Phase 2 begins immediately. Deep inside the colossal ships, weapon systems awakened. Across the Drora system, alarms exploded simultaneously. And for the first time, the countdown toward the fall of a galactic empire truly began. The Drora system had never known fear. For centuries, the capital of the Varesh Dominion had stood as the center of power in the Outer Rim. Its fleets were unmatched. Its armies were legendary. Entire civilizations trembled when Dominion warships appeared in their skies. Today, for the first time, the fear belonged to them. Across the system, military alarms echoed endlessly. Defense fleets raced into position. Thousands of fighters launched from orbital carriers. Planetary shields reached maximum strength. Every weapon the Dominion possessed was brought online, and still the 12 Nemesis vessels remained motionless, silent, watching, waiting. That silence terrified everyone. Inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Carrick stood before the massive tactical display. Hundreds of Dominion ships surrounded the capital world. Millions of weapons were locked onto the human fleet. Yet the humans made no move. One nervous admiral cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, perhaps they are bluffing." Several officers quickly nodded. The Emperor wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it because the alternative was unthinkable. Then the tactical display suddenly changed. A bright red symbol appeared over one of the Dominion defense stations. Confusion spread across the command center. "What is that?" A sensor officer checked his console. His face immediately turned pale. Energy spike detected. "How large?" The officer stared at the numbers, then checked them again and again. "No." The room became silent. "What?" The officer swallowed. "The energy output exceeds anything we've ever recorded." Before anyone could respond, space around the nearest Nemesis vessel began to glow. Massive rings embedded within the ship rotated slowly. Light gathered between them. The brightness intensified, then intensified again. The entire system seemed to tremble. Aboard the human flagship, Nemesis Prime, Fleet Marshal Kane stood calmly on the bridge. Around him, officers monitored hundreds of systems. Nobody appeared nervous. Nobody questioned the orders. They had all trained for this scenario. A tactical officer spoke. "Target locked." Kane nodded. "Fire." One word. Nothing more. The weapon discharged. There was no dramatic explosion, No visible beam crossing space, only a brief distortion, a ripple, as if reality itself had been touched. 3 seconds later, the Dominion defense station ceased to exist. Not damaged, not destroyed, gone, completely erased. Every atom, every system, every crew member gone. The station simply vanished from the tactical map. Across the Drora system, stunned silence followed. The impossible had happened. Inside the Imperial Palace, several officers stared at their displays in disbelief. One commander whispered, "Where did it go?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. An entire military installation had disappeared. Instantly, without warning, without debris, without survivors, Emperor Carrick felt a chill run down his spine. The confidence that had carried him through decades of conquest was beginning to crack. "Return fire," he ordered. The hesitation was obvious. Now, across the system, hundreds of Dominion warships opened fire simultaneously. The darkness of space erupted with energy. Thousands of weapons unleashed their full power toward the human fleet. It was enough firepower to annihilate planets. The bombardment continued for nearly 30 seconds. Then it stopped. Sensor operators immediately checked the results. And horror spread through every command center. The human fleet remained untouched. Not one ship had moved. Not one vessel had been damaged. A shimmering field surrounded them. A defensive technology centuries beyond anything the Dominion possessed. One officer stared at the readings. "We didn't even scratch them." The realization hit like a physical blow. The Dominion wasn't fighting an equal enemy. They were fighting something far beyond them. Meanwhile, at Sigma 7, the surviving crew continued their desperate defense. Only 9 minutes remained. Commander Graves watched the latest reports arrive from distant observers. His eyes widened. The Dominion capital was under direct threat. The Nemesis fleet had arrived. The impossible fleet was real. A young officer approached him. "Sir, is it true?" Graves smiled. "Yes. What happens now?" The commander looked toward the stars. A faint expression crossed his face. Now, another explosion shook the station. Now they discover why humanity hides its monsters. Back in the Drora system, panic spread among Dominion commanders. The first defense line had been erased. The second line was retreating. Civilian evacuation protocols activated across the capital. News networks struggled to maintain order. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Entire cities watched the giant human vessels hanging silently above their world. And then something even worse happened. A new transmission arrived. Fleet Marshal Kane appeared once more. This time his expression was colder, more serious. Behind him, tactical displays showed hundreds of Dominion ships. Every target already marked, every target already analyzed. Kane looked directly into the camera. "Your attack on Sigma 7 continues." Silence filled the broadcast. "You were offered peace." Another pause. "You refused." The bridge behind him grew quiet. Then Kane spoke the words that would soon become infamous throughout the galaxy. Effective immediately. "The Dominion's military infrastructure is no longer under our protection." The transmission ended. Across the Drora system, millions felt dread settle into their hearts. Because everyone understood what those words meant. Humanity had stopped warning them, and the real retaliation was about to begin. The silence after Kane's transmission lasted only seconds. Then the Drora system erupted into chaos. Every Dominion command channel lit up at once, fleets repositioned, defense grids recalibrated, civilian evacuation routes activated. But underneath all that activity, one fact had become unavoidable. Nothing they did mattered anymore because the enemy was no longer reacting. The enemy was executing. Above Drax's upper orbit, the 12 Nemesis vessels finally moved. Not as individual ships, but as a coordinated system. Perfect synchronization, perfect timing, perfect control. From the bridge of Nemesis Prime, Fleet Marshal Kane observed the battlefield with cold precision. Every Dominion formation was mapped. Every defense node was identified. Every command center was tagged. A tactical officer spoke quietly. All targets confirmed. Kane nodded once. Begin erasure protocol. No emotion, no hesitation, just execution. The first wave hit the outer defense ring. Across the system, dozens of Dominion stations blinked out of existence simultaneously. One moment they were there. The next moment, there was nothing. Not explosions, not wreckage, not drifting debris, just empty space where massive structures had once existed. Dominion commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. Report damage. Station Theta 4 is gone. The gamma array has vanished. It's not possible. There's nothing left to track. Panic spread through every channel, because this wasn't a battle. It was deleted. On Draper itself, millions of civilians looked up at the sky as lights flickered across the atmosphere. Orbital structures disappeared one after another. Entire defense platforms vanished silently. Some people fell to their knees, others ran. Most simply stood frozen, watching their world's protection dissolve above them. Inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Carrick gripped the edge of his throne. His advisors were shouting. Military officers were screaming orders, but the Emperor heard none of it. His eyes were locked on the tactical display. Half of his orbital defenses were already gone, and it had taken less than 30 seconds. One admiral finally broke the chaos. Redirect all fleets. Concentrate fire on the lead vessel. The order was sent instantly. Hundreds of Dominion warships adjusted their targeting systems. Every weapon locked onto Nemesis Prime and they fired. A storm of energy filled space, enough firepower to crack continents, enough to obliterate entire moons. The barrage struck the human fleet and vanished, not deflected, not absorbed, simply erased at the moment of contact. Like reality itself refused to acknowledge the attack. A junior officer whispered, "They're not even defending." The admiral snapped back, "No, they're above defending." The realization was unbearable. Inside Nemesis Prime, the bridge remained calm. Reports flowed in steadily. Outer defense layer neutralized. Command relay network collapsing. Enemy fleet cohesion breaking. Kane listened without interruption. Then he spoke. "Proceed to Phase 2. The officer nodded. "Launching gravitational." Cascade on the tactical display. New indicators activated, deep within the Nemesis vessels. Systems far beyond conventional physics came online. Energy built in controlled layers. Space around Drora began to distort. At first it was subtle. Gravitational sensors flickered. Orbital paths shifted slightly. Then it escalated. Moons changed trajectory. Orbital stations drifted off course. The planet's upper atmosphere began to ripple. One scientist aboard a Dominion observatory screamed, "The gravity field is destabilizing the entire system." At Sigma 7, Commander Graves watched the live data feeds from distant sensors. Only a few minutes remained. But now the battlefield reports had changed completely. He saw it. The Dominion capital system wasn't just being attacked. It was being dismantled piece by piece. A technician approached him. "Sir, what are those ships doing?" Graves didn't answer immediately. He studied the data. Then he spoke quietly. "They're unbuilding the battlefield." The technician looked confused. "What does that mean?" Graves' expression darkened. "It means there won't be anything left to fight over." Back in Dra orbit, entire fleets began to break formation. Panic had replaced discipline. Some ships attempted to retreat, others fired blindly. A few even tried to surrender, but there was no response, no communication, no acknowledgement. The Nemesis fleet was not listening anymore. It was completing its directive. One by one, Dominion warships disappeared. Hundreds of them, then thousands. The space above Drora grew emptier by the second until only the Imperial core fleet remained. And even they were starting to understand the truth. This was not an invasion. It was an execution. Inside the palace, Emperor Carrick finally stood. For the first time in his life, he looked small. The commander approached him urgently. "Your Majesty, we must evacuate." Another shouted, "The capital shields are failing." But Carrick didn't move. He stared at the sky above his world, at the human fleet, at the end of his empire. Then he whispered, "What are they?" No one answered because no one knew anymore. Far above them, Fleet Marshal Kane gave the final order for Phase 2. And the stars above Drara began to disappear one by one, system by system, until the Dominion capital world stood alone in darkness, surrounded by silence, and awaiting what came next. Drara was no longer a capital world. It was a cage, a dying jewel suspended in silence. Above it, the sky had changed completely. What once had been a dense orbital network of warships, stations, and defense grids was now mostly empty space. The Dominion's military presence, centuries of accumulated power, had been erased layer by layer, and still the Nemesis fleet had not finished. Inside the Imperial Palace, alarms no longer sounded with urgency. They sounded with resignation. Systems were failing too fast to report properly. Entire sectors of the palace had lost power. Emergency lighting flickered across cracked marble walls. Emperor Carrick stood alone at the center of the command hall. His advisors were gone. Some had fled. Some had stopped responding. Some no longer mattered. A tactical officer crawled back to the main console. Blood on his uniform. "Your Majesty." Carrick didn't turn. "What remains?" The officer hesitated. "The Imperial core fleet is gone." A long silence followed. Gone. Not defeated, not scattered. Gone as if it had never existed. Outside the palace windows, the sky above Drara was almost empty now. Only the 12 Nemesis vessels remained, watching, waiting, judging. Aboard Nemesis Prime Fleet, Marshal Kane studied the final battlefield readouts. The Dominion's outer defenses had been completely erased. Their fleets were destroyed or dissolved. Their command structure collapsed. Only one target remained, the capital world itself. A tactical officer spoke. "Gravitational cascades stabilized. Planetary orbit is now unstable but contained." Another officer added. "Surface infrastructure is exposed." Kane nodded. "Civilian casualty projections." Pause. Then the answer came. "Severe. If we proceed with full planetary strike." Silence followed. No one questioned the data. No one questioned the possibility. But Kane raised a hand. "Hold." The bridge went quiet. Even in the middle of annihilation, there was discipline. Kane stepped forward slightly. "Open a channel to the planet." Inside the Imperial Palace, every remaining console suddenly lit up. A new transmission. Human origin. Emperor Carrick turned slowly. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something other than anger. He felt exhausted. "Answer it," he said. The transmission connected. Fleet Marshal Kane appeared again, but this time there was something different in his expression. Not anger, not hatred, just finality. Behind him, the Nemesis fleet hung motionless above the planet, like executioners awaiting a final command. Kane spoke. "The Dominion has been neutralized as a military threat. No reaction. The cost of your attack on Sigma 7 has been paid in full." Pause. Then the words that silenced even the palace's failing systems. "This war is over." Carrick finally spoke. His voice was Oro. "What are you going to do to my world?" Kane looked at him for a long moment. Then he answered, "That depends. Silence on what remains of your leadership." Outside on the planet's surface, billions watched the sky. News feeds were gone. Government systems were collapsing. Only scattered emergency broadcasts still functioned. People stood in the streets looking upward at the impossible fleet above them. At the silence it carried. Then a new transmission spread globally. Not military, not encrypted, public. Every speaker, every screen, every surviving network. Fleet Marshal Kane's voice echoed across Drara. "You attacked a human frontier station." Pause. "You killed its defenders." Another pause. "You believed we would respond like others you have conquered." His voice hardened slightly. "You were wrong. Inside Nemesis Prime, weapon systems remained online, ready, waiting but not firing. Kane continued, "Humanity does not seek extinction." A subtle shift in tone. "But we do enforce consequences." The palace fell silent. Even Emperor Carrick listened. Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. Drora will not be destroyed today. A wave of disbelief swept through the surviving Dominion officers, but the relief was short-lived, because Kane wasn't finished. However, a pause that felt heavier than any weapon fired in the system. "Your empire ends here." Across the Drora system, something changed. The Nemesis fleet began moving again, but not toward destruction, toward containment. Massive energy fields expanded from the ships. Orbital control grids activated. Every remaining Dominion warship was disabled instantly, not destroyed, but immobilized. Entire command networks were shut down, weapons systems locked, communications severed. One officer on Dare whispered, "They're taking control of the system." Another responded, "No." A terrified pause. "They're taking control of everything." Inside the palace, the alarm stopped. Not because systems were restored, but because there was nothing left to report. Emperor Carrick slowly sat back on his throne. For the first time since his reign began, he was no longer an emperor commanding an empire. He was a prisoner of history. Above him, Fleet Marshal Kane delivered the final message. "The Varesh Dominion is hereby dissolved." A pause. "Surviving systems will be placed under TAN oversight." Another pause. "Resist, and you will be removed." Silence followed, not of defiance, but of understanding. The Dominion had not lost a battle. It had lost its future. And above the shattered capital world, humanity's fleet remained, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as the final answer to a mistake the galaxy would never forget. Drora did not feel like a conquered world. Felt like a world that had been stopped, as if someone had placed a hand over the galaxy and pressed pause on an entire empire. The skies were no longer filled with firing weapons or burning fleets. They were quiet. Too quiet. The 12 Nemesis vessels remained in orbit, unmoving like colossal guardians made of shadow and steel. Their presence alone was enough to keep every surviving Dominion system in absolute submission. No one dared to fire. No one dared to resist, because everyone now understood the truth. Resistance was no longer war. It was self-erasure. Inside Nemesis Prime, the atmosphere on the bridge had shifted. The combat phase was over. What remained was control. A tactical officer reported calmly, "All major Dominion military nodes have been secured or disabled." Another officer followed. "The remaining systems are requesting instructions." Fleet Marshal Kane stood at the center of the bridge. Studying the data feeds, the Dominion had not been wiped out. That had never been the objective. Instead, it had been stripped of its fleets, stripped of its command structure, stripped of its illusion of invincibility. Now it remains contained. Kane spoke. "Begin stabilization protocols." The officer nodded. "Yes, sir." Across the system, massive energy fields shifted, not destructive, restraining. Orbital debris was cleared. Collapse stations were stabilized into controlled drift zones. Disabled ships were pulled into holding patterns. The battlefield was becoming a controlled environment, not a war zone. A monitored collapse. Far below, on Dryar's surface, billions of citizens waited. They didn't know what came next, only that something had changed. The terror was still there, but it was no longer active destruction. It was judgment. Then a new message appeared across every remaining communication system. Not from the Dominion, not from emergency services, from Earth. A unified Terran broadcast. Fleet Marshal Kane's voice returned. "Karma now measured. You will not be harmed if you comply." Pause. "Civilian populations are not targets." Across the planet, people listened in stunned silence. This was not what they expected. After everything they had seen, everything they had witnessed, they expected annihilation. But instead, there was structure, rules, limits. Kane continued. All military personnel will stand down. All weapon systems will remain offline. All command structures are dissolved. A longer pause, then the final instruction. Your war is over. Your choices now determine your survival. Inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Carrick stood surrounded by ruins of authority. His empire no longer answered him. It answered in silence. A Terran containment team had already entered orbit above the palace. Not soldiers, not invaders, observers, monitors, enforcers of a new order. Carrick finally spoke to the empty chamber. Is this victory? No one answered, because there was no one left to answer him. Aboard Nemesis Prime, Kane reviewed the final reports from Sigma-7. The station had survived barely. Its distress signal had been the catalyst for everything that followed. A junior officer approached. Sir, Sigma-7 is requesting confirmation of evacuation success. Kane nodded. Patch them through. The connection opened. Commander Ethan Graves appeared on screen. His face was exhausted but alive. Fleet Marshal, Graves said. Kane responded simply, Report. Graves exhaled slowly. The station is lost, but personnel are secure. A pause. 37 casualties confirmed. Most from the initial assault. Silence followed. Graves looked away briefly, then back at the screen. What happens now? Kane didn't answer immediately. He turned slightly, looking at the tactical display of Drora. Then he said, Now they learn what consequences mean. Elsewhere in the galaxy, news of Drora's fall spread rapidly, but the stories were inconsistent. Some called it genocide, others called it liberation, some called it the end of the Dominion, others called it the beginning of something far worse, because every civilization understood one undeniable fact. Humanity had just revealed a level of military capability no one had ever imagined. Not to expand, not to conquer, but to respond. Back on Draca, the Nemesis fleet began to shift position, not leaving, not attacking, orbiting in structured formations, maintaining control. A network of Terran enforcement vessels began arriving through jump corridors, establishing long-term oversight zones. The Dominion's age of expansion was over. Its age of consequences had begun. On Nemesis Prime, Kane delivered the final operational order. Maintain containment. No escalation unless provoked. The officer nodded. Yes, sir. Kane looked once more at the planet below. A civilization that had mistaken silence for weakness and paid the price for it. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. They will remember this. And the stars above Drora remained still, not as witnesses to destruction, but as witnesses to control. Drora did not rebuild overnight. It did not collapse further either. It existed in a strange, suspended state, alive, but no longer free. The Nemesis fleet still orbited above the capital world, but their presence had changed. The weapons were no longer active. The targeting systems were no longer charged. Yet every Dominion citizen knew the truth. They were still there, and that was enough. 3 days after the battle, the first Terran enforcement vessels arrived in the system. They were not Nemesis class. They were smaller, cleaner, more formal. Their purpose was not destruction. It was governance. Aboard the lead ship, Fleet Marshal Jonathan Kai stood in the observation deck, watching Draper rotate slowly beneath them. A junior officer approached. Civil order is stabilizing, sir. Resistance groups are minimal. Most military units have surrendered. Kane nodded slightly. Casualties. The officer hesitated. Lower than projected. Civilian protection protocols held. Pause. Dominion leadership is cooperating. Kane didn't respond immediately. He simply watched the planet. Then he spoke. Good. One word. No celebration, no satisfaction, only confirmation that the objective had been achieved. Far below on Drora's surface, the meaning of power had changed forever. Once Dominion banners had ruled the skies. Now Terran oversight stations floated above every major city. Energy grids monitored orbital traffic. Weapons systems remained disabled under strict control. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion was not expanding. It was being observed. A new transmission was broadcast system-wide. Fleet Marshal Kane appeared once again, this time not as a war commander, but as an administrator of consequence. The Varesh Dominion will remain intact as a political entity under Terran supervision. Pause. However, all military expansion is permanently prohibited. Another pause. Any attempt to rebuild offensive capability will be treated as hostile action. The message ended. No threats, no anger, just finality. Inside the remnants of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Carrick stood in a quiet chamber, stripped of its authority. No advisors remained. No fleets responded. No empire obeyed. Only silence. A Terran liaison officer entered the room. Not armed, not guarded, just present. Emperor Carrick, the officer said calmly, you are required for the governance transition. Carrick turned slowly. For the first time, he did not speak like an emperor. What am I now? The officer considered the question carefully, then answered honestly. A witness. In orbit, aboard Nemesis Prime Commander Ethan Graves reviewed the final report of Sigma-7. The station had been rebuilt elsewhere. The surviving crew was reassigned. This purpose is archived, a symbol now, nothing more. Graves stood beside Kane on the bridge. Sir, he said quietly, was it necessary? All of it. Kane didn't look away from Dra. Yes. Pause. Graves continued. They attacked a frontier station. Kane nodded and learned it was not alone. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Graves exhaled. So what happens now? Kane finally turned. His expression was calm, but tired in a way only those who carry impossible responsibility understand. Now, the galaxy recalculates humanity. Across known space, it already had begun. The Dominion was no longer feared. It was remembered as an example, a warning, a mistake, and humanity once dismissed as peaceful, even harmless, had become something else entirely. Not a conqueror, not an aggressor, but a final response. A civilization that did not strike first, but ensured no one would survive striking them. In the quiet orbit above Drora, the Nemesis fleet slowly shifted into long-term standby formation. Their mission was complete. Sigma-7 was avenged, the Dominion was broken, and the galaxy had learned a new truth it would never forget. Humanity does not seek war, but when war is forced upon them, they do not end battles. They end possibilities. Far beneath the silent ships, Emperor Carrick looked up at the sky one last time. No anger remained, no pride, only understanding. And in that understanding, fear finally became permanent, because the galaxy had not been conquered. It had been warned, and it would never dare forget that warning again.